What's up, you guys? A little disclaimer before we jump into the episode. This content is not intended to substitute for mental health treatment, professional advice, or a diagnosis. If you feel like you're suffering from a mental illness, please seek medical assistance, talk to a skilled counselor, or get in contact with the crisis center. So with that being said, let's jump into the episode. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the Sweet to the Soul podcast. It's your host, Nevaeh Galan, and I'd posted on my socials the past couple weeks of what you guys wanted to hear more about in my upcoming podcast episodes, and I got a lot of comments about people wanting to hear about my opinion on mental health, and that's just going to be the basis for this episode. I just really want to bring awareness to mental health because I feel like in our society today, people get really uncomfortable talking about mental health, and I just think that it's terrible. Mental health shouldn't be something that you're uncomfortable talking about, and I feel like that's why suicide rates are at like an all-time high, because people who suffer with mental illnesses feel like they don't have an outlet or they don't have somebody to go to and talk to about what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's really important, no matter what you're going through, to always have a support system. And it's just honestly the same thing with therapy, which I am going to touch on in this episode as well. People are ashamed to get help or even admit that they're seeking out help through therapy. And I just think it's so messed up. But I don't want to go too deeply into my feelings right now because we're just at the intro. But I am going to be talking about a lot of this. And I just think it's something that needs to be talked about more in our society today. So just starting off, like what I usually do in every episode, I just want to talk about my personal experience with mental health. Again, it's really serious and something that should be taken very seriously, and I just feel like it's not nowadays. So for me personally, I feel like I've been dealing with mental health for a while now, but I don't think I fully understood the concept of it or realized what exactly I was going through until about 2019 or 2020. I've gone through a lot of things at such a young age, and some of which I kind of put myself into, but there were also some situations that were just thrown onto me. So I felt like I was forced to grow up pretty quickly. Growing up, I didn't live in the healthiest household, so I know that some of those situations that I've gone through are the cause for things like depression and anxiety, and I've realized that now. But of course, when you're going through those situations, especially as a kid, you're so blinded to what you're going through, especially if it's in like a household that's kind of just like your normal, so you're used to it, so you don't think it's out of the norm. So when you're going through those situations, you think like every other child your age is going through because that's what you're used to. So it wasn't until 2019 and 2020 that I realized some of the symptoms I was showing were signs of depression and signs of anxiety. And when I realized that, I kind of had to take a hold of it and figure out how to redirect my life into a more positive way so that I wasn't experiencing a lot of these symptoms on such a regular basis. And honestly, it feels like I've been dealing with these symptoms for as long as I can remember, whether it was staying up late and overthinking things all the time in relationships or just in my personal life, or if it was feeling like I wasn't doing enough as a daughter, a sibling, a student, an athlete, whatever the case was. I always felt like I was dealing with these symptoms of depression and anxiety, but it wasn't until recently where I was able to pinpoint what it was I was going through and actually get to the root of the issues. And I did always grow up in a Christian household where we went to church every Sunday, and I honestly feel like even now, mental health isn't talked about enough in the church. Capital T, capital C, the church. So for part of my life, I felt ashamed to even talk about the things I was experiencing and the things that I was going through, because to me, it just felt like it wasn't one of those topics where you discussed it regularly. It was one of those topics where it was not okay to discuss. And while we're on the topic of Christianity and religion, I also feel like a lot of people disapprove of this idea of Christians having mental illnesses. Some people think that when you give your life to God, all of these problems are supposed to just magically go away from your life. Everything that you dealt with before accepting God is just not supposed to happen anymore. And that couldn't be anything farther from the truth. A lot of people will say that if these issues are happening, you aren't living out the quote-unquote real Christian life. People will often say you must not be praying enough, you must not be reading your Bible enough, you haven't fully given the situation to God, you aren't trusting Him with your mental illnesses. And that is just not the case whatsoever. So if you're listening to this right now and you have had people who have said these things to you or made you feel less qualified because you suffer with mental illnesses, First, I just want to say I'm so sorry that you've had to experience that. And I'm also here to tell you that your emotions, your symptoms, your trauma, your experiences, all of these things that you're going through are valid. And no one can take that away from you. Just because you're experiencing or suffering with a mental illness does not mean that you think God isn't enough. There's also another idea in the church or in just non-believers in general that they think because you're seeking out help through medication or through therapy that you just don't think God will be able to heal you. And once again, that is not the case. There are some things that you need to medically get diagnosed with and get medical help from. Just like when you have a headache and you pop an ibuprofen or pop a Tylenol, does that mean you're not trusting God with your headache or your stomach ache or any of these things? No, there's just certain things that prescription is going to help heal you because it's a mind thing, it's a brain thing, it's a neurological thing that you need to get help with. So therapy will also be another thing we will talk about because I think that's a big thing in the church as well. People who are seeking out therapy rather than going to God. And there's just so many ways you can look at it, and there's a right way and there's a wrong way, and then there's the in the middle way. But I'm going to be talking about my experience with mental health and also with my experience with therapy because I have reached out and I have gone to therapy and I am still going to therapy because therapy is not my replacement for God. Therapy and God go hand in hand, but there's some things that you need to talk to another person with to realize that there's things going on in your head, things that you're suffering with. And once you have brought those things out, once you have gotten to the root of that, that is when you can pray to God. That is when you can ask God for help because you're putting an actual name or diagnosis to what you're suffering with. And that's when you can go to God and ask for guidance and ask for wisdom. All right, so now kind of just steering away from the whole religion, getting back to just depression and anxiety and all these other mental illnesses because there are a ton out there. But I personally feel like I suffer with depression and anxiety a lot because going back to like my childhood, there were certain parts of care and of love that I feel like I lacked. I lacked the attention of getting those things, which kind of rooted my depression and anxiety. And honestly, it made it feel normal to me. I've gotten now to the point in my life where I have personally for myself normalized depression and anxiety. And honestly, I feel like that is a good thing that I have done this because a lot of times when you're talking about depression and anxiety, it's one of those topics where you have to be careful to not, step on any toes and step on any hard topics. But to me, it's something I've gotten really just comfortable with talking about because it's something that I've always had to deal with, and it has honestly brought out the strongest side of me that I've ever witnessed for myself. To know that I was suffering with these things, not knowing what I was going through, not asking for help, but I still overcame these things. So some of just the regular symptoms that I would suffer with would be not being able to sleep, and if I was able to get to bed, I had a very hard time sleeping through the night. And even when I was up throughout the day, I would just find myself wanting to sleep rather than doing anything else. I had a lack of enthusiasm for certain things that I used to love. I was sad sometimes for no apparent reason. I would just lay in bed and cry myself to sleep, not knowing why I was crying or why I was upset. And I also forced myself into doing things just so that I could distract my brain from thinking all the time because I am such an overthinker. So what that looked like for me would be always in my schoolwork, always doing something, always getting involved in something after school, whether it was dancing or cheerleading, to just one, keep me from being at home, and then also to keep me from thinking. And throughout my whole life, everyone knew me as, always being the smart one, always being into my academics, and they did not realize the flip side of that would being that was something I was struggling with. I always had to keep that persona up for people when in reality, that's not who I was. It was just something that I did to keep myself from thinking. It was a sign of depression and a sign of anxiety. And I also noticed that I always felt tense all of the time, and I was always thinking about my future. I was worried about my future. What could I be doing now that could benefit my future? And that is a major sign of anxiety. Always needing your future laid out ahead of you, always needing to know what obstacles that you're going to face so that you can prepare now. And I would say my symptoms with mental illness got really bad when COVID hit because we were shut down in quarantine and I was forced to be in my house, which wasn't the safest place mentally for me at the time. And this was also the time where the whole world was suffering with depression and anxiety. They were all at an all-time high. And you saw a lot of that in students, because here I am trying to complete the last half of my year, which was completely online. My last half of my junior year was online, and then all of my senior year was completely online. And for students, we're trying to finish. We're trying to end the race, and here I am stuck in bed on Zoom all day long. I had no motivation to do anything. I got in a slump, which I could not get myself out of. That wasn't normal for me. Again, I was into academics. I always wanted to perform at the best of my ability, but here I am sitting in bed and I'm not completing assignments on time, not completing them to the best of my ability. I had no motivation in school whatsoever, did not care if I went to college or not, did not care where I went to college, and all of that just really heightened those symptoms that I was feeling, not being able to go to bed, not being able to sleep through the night, not knowing why I was feeling depressed. And honestly, it got really serious. And I think it got serious for everyone. I think this was the time where we started to take mental health a little bit more seriously than what we did, because even suicide rates were at an all-time high. And it got just bad really quickly. But then COVID died down a little bit. I was getting back to my routine of going to school once I entered in my first year of college, and I went through a breakup. And the cycle it started all over again. And I felt like, honestly, the symptoms that I had experienced then through that breakup wasn't because of the breakup itself. Obviously, I was hurt by it, but it was honestly the best thing I could have ever done for myself. And I'm so grateful looking back that it had happened. But it was just the fact of, when you're in a relationship, this person becomes your other half, and they could become your support system. And when you lose that support system, you lose everything that comes with it. So the person that I would vent to about my mental illnesses, the person that would come for me through those hard times, is now gone. So I had to find something else to put my energy into, something else to vent to, and that is when we get into therapy. So with my personal experience, therapy has been one of the best things I could have ever done for myself when I was experiencing these symptoms of mental health. That is not always the case when it comes to people who experience therapy and go through therapy. It can be really scary for a lot of people, because especially if you don't have awareness of what you're going through already, to have someone sit across from you and tell you, like, hey, this is what I'm diagnosing you with, this is what you're going through, that can be scary. And a lot of people don't like to accept those things, and that's when you can get a lot of people who have terrible experiences with therapy and their therapist. And then there are also some therapists out there who, unfortunately, don't do their job to the best ability. I was fortunate enough where my therapist is the most amazing person that I could meet, and she has really helped me grow and helped me point out certain situations in my life that have caused these symptoms to arise. So I started going to therapy, I want to say late September or early October of 2021. I had started going just because of my breakup. I was in a very deep state of depression, which I never experienced before. Usually, again, my symptoms of depression being sad all the time, crying all the time, not eating, not sleeping. But in this case, after my breakup, I didn't feel any of those symptoms. The only main symptom I felt was feeling numb. And it honestly set off a little trigger in my head, because I had never felt this way. I usually have a bunch of emotions going on when I'm feeling this way. And in this case, I did not have any of those things. So when I had met with her and we were talking, that feeling of numbness was actually a symptom of a really deep depression that I was going through. And it was just nice to be able to have a name or have a reason for what I was going through. And although my one reason for going to therapy was my breakup, the sessions continued and we started talking about a million other things that were going on in my life that I had no awareness of, that I had no awareness of why I was feeling these symptoms, me thinking it was just one thing and her pointing out that no, it's actually a million other things that you're going through. And again, for some people that can be scary. But for me, I was always aware of the symptoms I was going through. I just didn't have a name to put to the symptoms. And now going through therapy, I was able to get that. So in therapy, we've discussed my breakup, we have discussed my past relationships with men, and just like signs that I need to look out for in the future, signs that I should have looked out for in those relationships. Also, we talked about my family issues, the trauma that I've experienced from age 0 to now 19, and just how to kind of work through those issues and how not to avoid them, because I found at times I always kind of just pushed everything to the back burner. I didn't want to acknowledge what I was going through, and I've also done that in therapy where I went into therapy thinking, okay, I'm not going to talk about this because if I talk about this, she's going to bring up the psychological view of it, and I don't want to hear that right now. But it was healthy for me to actually hear those things. So I've gotten a lot better with speaking about my feelings and not letting people walk all over me, because I'm a really sympathetic and empathetic person. So I'm very understanding of other people's feelings, but that could be a real weakness for a lot of people, and it was becoming a weakness for me. So overall, therapy has been a really eye-opening experience for me, and it's something that I am definitely going to continue on doing in the future, because there are certain things about myself that I just want answers to. There are certain things that I just want awareness of that I don't have awareness of now. So overall, therapy has been really beneficial. So if you're thinking about going, I definitely recommend just trying. If you realize it isn't for you, then stop doing it. Find another source or outlet that you can go to and talk about your emotions. And in no way am I saying that therapy is easy, because it isn't. And it really just depends on the type of person you are. I feel like I'm really open with talking about my feelings now, so therapy has kind of been easy for me. But I know people who have a really difficult time talking about their emotions, so it can be uncomfortable. I know my first session, I was really nervous. I did feel uncomfortable because here I am pouring my emotions and my feelings out to this person who I don't know. But once that bond was there, once that connection was there, it got really easy for me, and I know that she has my best interests at heart, and I know she just wants to see me succeed, and that's just the type of environment that you want to surround yourself with. And I also want to say to make sure that you're going to therapy for the right reasons, because I know that there are a lot of people who just go through a situation and decide to seek out therapy just so they can hear the words, "You're right, they're wrong. You're looking at it the right way, they're looking at it the wrong way. They hurt you, you didn't hurt them." All of those things, they just want validation, when in reality, therapy will not always be like that. Yes, there were certain things that my therapist had told me, like, you were in the right to do that. Your emotions are valid. But there's also other things that she said, you didn't handle that in the healthiest way. You were wrong there. You shouldn't have done this. I don't think that's going to benefit you. And you have to be able to hear both sides of that situation. You have to be able to accept both sides of that situation. So just really evaluate the right reasons that you're going to therapy. Make sure it's coming from within, that you really want to better yourself. All right, one of the last things I'm going to discuss in this episode is the topic of men's mental health specifically. Like I said before, mental health is not talked about enough, and I think that men's mental health is talked about even less. And a lot of you guys wanted to know my opinion on this, and I am definitely going to share it, because it's something that needs to be brought to the surface of everyone's conversation when they're talking about mental health. And I really wish I would have brought a guy on here to feature on this episode, because I feel like I can't give a full perspective on it, because obviously I'm not a man. So I don't know what's going through your head, but I feel like I have an idea. So first, I want to say that a lot of women, if we're being honest, think that men don't have feelings. And I feel like definitely, if I'm being vulnerable right now, for part of my life, I felt like that. Not that they didn't have feelings necessarily, but it was weird of them to show feelings. And once I started dealing with mental illnesses on my own, I realized that we should never label men as not having feelings, because it's serious. And I feel like a big part of this has to do with the fact that for so long, men were looked upon as being the strong ones, the ones who run the family, who have everything together. And that just should have never been the case. That should have never been how we labeled men. And again, I can't speak on a man's point of view, but if I got this right, men don't want to be looked upon as vulnerable. I need to know if I'm right. I need a man out there. Let me know if I'm going somewhere with this. But I feel like with the right person, a man can be very vulnerable, but they have to have trust with them. I would say probably the closest person a man is going to be vulnerable with is going to be to their mother. There's just that connection there that a man can always feel comfortable talking to their mother about certain feelings that they're going through. And if we're looking at it from a relationship perspective, a man should have so much trust in their partner that they can talk to their partner about their emotions, because if you can't, there's no foundation in that relationship. And I feel like in order for a man to be vulnerable with somebody, one, the trust has to be there, but also the man has to know that the vulnerability that they're showing is going to be reciprocated by the other person, whether it's a man or if it's a female. Because for women, I feel like they're very easy with showing their emotion because they, not necessarily, I don't want to say they want the attention from somebody, but they want answers. They want somebody to feel what they're feeling, to understand what they're feeling. They want feedback. They want advice. So women, I feel like, will be very straight on with talking about their feelings, whereas a man might think like, why am I going to share my emotions with you if I'm not going to get anything in return? Why am I going to ask for advice when in reality your advice may not be what I need? Like, I'm going to share these emotions with you, but what am I going to get out of it? I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like I'm really cracking the code on this thing. And men also don't handle or talk about their feelings the same way that women do. So I strongly believe that there might be more men out there that are actually going through depression over females. The only difference is that they don't know what they're going through. They're not aware of what it is they're going through. So why are they going to seek out help? Because they're not understanding that they're going through depression or they're going through anxiety, PTSD, OCD. So why are they going to seek help on that? And they also aren't going to really talk about it with other people. Because I think this starts, like the root of this starts in childhood. When you're growing up in a family, men aren't usually asked, how does this make you feel? What's going through your head right now? Are you okay? It's more of a, if something happens, it's more of a pull your act together kind of situation. Whereas if a girl were to get hurt or something would have happened at the house, it's always, are you okay? What are you feeling? What's going on through your head? So men just aren't really used to discussing their emotions with other people. So everything just gets pushed down. And that's why you see a lot of men, unfortunately, turn into very angry men or abusers. Because actually, something I realized when I was thinking about mental health and comparing it from a man to a female, men actually show different symptoms of depression versus a female. And that's just mind-blowing to me that that is actually a thing, like based off gender. But a man would get angry, and that form of anger is actually a sign of depression, whereas a form of anger for a woman would not be a sign of depression. So when you see a lot of men growing up into abusers, that actually shows that their emotions just never, it was never able to come to the surface as a kid because it was pushed down, and now it's turning out into anger. So check up on all the men in your life right now, your dad, your brother, an uncle, a grandfather, a coworker, a boyfriend, a husband. Check up on them because it's important to talk about this, and we can't just say that we're going to start speaking out on mental illness, but then we treat females and males differently. That's not how this is supposed to work. That's not how it should work. And if you feel like you're going through any of these symptoms, if you feel like you need to reach out, I am always here, ready to listen to you guys and ready to give you guys advice. But if you think you need that next step, please go reach out to a doctor or a therapist. Get on medication if you feel like that's what's going to work best for you. And please make sure that you talk to somebody about what you're going through. I promise you that there is somebody ready to listen to you. They're ready to help you, but they just need to know that you're going through it. And I promise you that it gets better every day. There is a light to the end of the tunnel. I promise you. I had to say that because I don't want to lead this off on a very depressing note. But yeah, that concludes this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed listening and tuning in, and I will see you guys all next week. Peace out.